Join me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast to hear fascinating stories every week from the inspiring people behind the science. The next episode is for you if you want to find out what racing driving, marine biology and fencing have in common. Spoiler alert, it may be my next guest, Dr Diane Turner. Hi Diane, thank you so much for joining us. Today we've got Dr Diane Turner, Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry, author, trainer, consultant and entrepreneur. Now, which sounds like quite a lot really, but I have to tell you that's not the half of it. Diane, you've done an awful lot, and as I said, I haven't really scratched the surface with that introduction. And you graduated from Warwick University with a master's degree in analytical chemistry, but that's sort of like the halfway point, and there's so much that happened before then. I wouldn't mind if you could just take us back to where it all began, because I don't think in total there are many people born on the Isles of Scilly. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So I've got a population of around 2,000 people spread across 5 islands. So it is very, very tiny.
Wonderful. So you were born on the Isles of Scilly, and you went to primary school there. You basically lived the island life.
Well, the Isles of Scilly is off the end of Land's End in Cornwall, so 28 miles. So that makes it further away than France is, so which we're quite proud of course. And so I went to primary school on the Isles of Scilly, and then also secondary school. So there are 4 primary schools in the Isles of Scilly, and people live across 5 islands. So from one of those islands, not one of the ones that I lived on, they went to school every day on the boat, which is very exciting. I'm from the biggest island, St Mary's, and there we had a secondary school, and the only secondary school in the Isles of Scilly. So when I was there, all the children from the other islands then came on a Monday morning, which meant that we started school slightly later on a Monday. They boarded during the week, and then they went home again on Friday afternoon. So we finished school slightly earlier on a Friday afternoon to enable that to happen. Although when there was a bit of storms in the winter, it didn't always happen that way. But it's a little bit of flexible school times depending on the time of year and the children who were going.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't immediately obvious that science was going to be the route that you went down, because your parents weren't necessarily academic, and they hadn't studied in the field, and it wasn't a known subject necessarily.
Absolutely. I mean, my father is Scilonian, so he's born and bred on the Isles of Scilly, and my mum is from St Ives in Cornwall, and she moved there. They both left school at age 15. My father became a shipwright, learning how to fix boats, and then he was also a boatman, so he went to work for the local vet who looked after the wildlife in the Isles of Scilly at the time, and that was then taken over by the Nature Conservancy Council, which was then also Natural England and English Nature. And my whole life he worked for basically looking after the wildlife. My mum, she worked in a hotel as a receptionist and tied flowers during the summer. So the Isles of Scilly isn't very well known for science. It's based really around farming, especially flower farming in the winter, and tourism in the summer, and of course fishing as well. So there's not really many or any jobs that you can really do in science at all. Mm-hmm. I was quite lucky though, because my father looking after the wildlife, we did have people coming over from the mainland, from universities, to actually study different aspects of the wildlife on Scilly. So for example, the marram grass, the sand dunes, the butterflies, and birds as well, and of course also underwater. So the Zostera marina, which is the only flowering plant that lives under the sea, which is commonly known as seagrass. So I did have that bit of influence. I did my first official marine survey aged 8. So looking at the Zostera marina, looking and measuring the length of it and everything from the survey work. And when I started scuba diving age of 14, so that was the youngest you could scuba dive, I was really interested in marine biology, of course, at the time. And then from once I got my qualifications, that's when I started going back and doing the survey work on the seagrass, as well as sediment surveys, and looking at Devonshire cup corals and all the jewel anemones and everything else that is abundant on the Isles of Scilly. So and working with my father was very, very exciting, and I really enjoyed that. So he was involved in the marine surveys from the 1970s all the way through to actually only a few years ago. So even after retiring, he was still involved with them, because he knows every single rock and every single area on the Isles of Scilly that is abundant in marine life. So that was kind of my influence on the science side.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose it's not necessarily a given that anyone's going to go to university, wherever they come from. But you had a particular teacher, is that right, that thought different about you?
Absolutely. So my teacher, Mrs. Ottery, who was my second teacher at primary school, so she told my mum that I would go to university, and my mum said, don't be so ridiculous, that probably won't happen, because none of my family had ever been to university, and actually none of my family's ever been to university since either. So they've kind of gone more vocational sort of work and careers. So yeah, so she was I guess quite an underlying it had quite an underlying impact, really. I think how I got into chemistry, though, is still a little bit unsure about, because I was heavily into marine biology at school, and all I can think of is that so our secondary school had a total of 110 students in it across the 5 years, and we only had 2 science teachers, one who's a physicist and one who was a biologist. So chemistry was taught between both of those. So I think I got very interested in chemistry because it was in both of those worlds of physics and biology, being taught by both of those. And I could really see how it was very central in everything. And I got very, very interested down at the molecular scale, and elements and atoms and molecules, but also then at the much bigger scale as well. So yeah, so that, when I went to go and do my A levels, I decided to do Spanish because I really enjoyed French at school, but we couldn't study Spanish at a very, very small school, so I decided to do Spanish from scratch at A level. I did chemistry and I also did maths, but I couldn't do those on the Isles of Scilly. There's no schooling post 16, so I had to move to the mainland. And I was fortunate enough, because my mum was from St Ives in Cornwall, my gran still lived there, so I went to live with her for 2 years to then do my A levels at Penwith College in Penzance. And that was very scary, because on my first day I had to catch a bus. And I'd never caught a bus before. I'd caught helicopters and planes and boats, but never a bus before. And of course, everyone, it was very small in the Isles of Scilly, so everyone knew if you were coming, they would hold it for you and wait for you, but the bus wouldn't wait. So that was very, very nerve-wracking.
Wow, it's so the opposite of what a lot of other people experience, isn't it? That you perfectly used to catching a helicopter, but a bus was a whole new territory.
Absolutely. Or a train as well. Trains are quite scary as well.
Yeah. So you did your A levels. You obviously went through those with flying colours, and then it was time to look at university options.
Absolutely. So why did I choose Warwick University? Quite simply because my boyfriend, who I'd met through the Air Training Corps, which I had joined when I moved to the mainland to do my A levels, he went to Warwick University. And I went up and saw the university from the other side, from the Students' Union side of it. Really enjoyed it. Went to, of course, went to the open days. It's a little bit difficult, but I went to the open days for other universities as well to have a look around. But I really saw both sides of Warwick University, so the socializing student side of it, as well as the chemistry, etc. So that was one of the main reasons, but also because it was a campus university, and coming from a very small island, having that close-knit community as well was really, kind of really important to me. Where it was, how far away it was, I mean, everything is far away from the Isles of Scilly, so that didn't really matter. And whereas everybody else had their parents collecting them to and from at the end of terms, etc., I was treated more like an overseas student. So I couldn't carry my things down on the train. So I used to stay usually about half the Christmas holidays and the Easter holidays to study. And then left everything in storage in halls, and then just caught the train home, and then of course the helicopter in the winter back to the Isles of Scilly, to spend 1 or 2 weeks with my family.
Wow. Yeah, it's an eye-opening experience listening to you, even never mind actually doing it. Um, so tell me how you felt when you graduated.
Yeah, I was really excited when I graduated. So again, my parents very, very proud. They both came up, of course. And actually they kind of like throughout my staying at university, they took the opportunity to come and visit other parts of the country. Which they didn't get to do very, very often, just once a year. But it was really nice to kind of show them around and everything. So very, very exciting. And they were very, very excited for me. I was also very excited because I won the final year project, the best final year project on my course. So the Andrew McHamley prize. And I'd also been promised that there was funding available for me to continue that into doing a PhD if I wanted to, which is also very exciting. It's in organic synthesis, so an area that I was very interested in. And the project I was done, my brother actually was born with a hole in his heart. And he had to have open heart surgery when he was 9 years old. And then when I was at university, he actually had a pig's valve put in, etc. as well. So actually my project was actually on glycolipid analogues and their influence basically with heart transplants from other animals like pigs. So that was really, really close to home, and I was very, very interested in that, and so very, very excited to be continuing that work. So throughout university I had worked basically to earn enough money to live, and I worked in the Students' Union, which of course one of the main reasons of going to more at university. But in the summers I've taken the opportunity of the longer summers to actually go off traveling and work overseas. So I did BUNAC, so the British University's North American Club, and which then gives you a visa to go and work in the States. So I spent my first summer at university working in Massachusetts at a fun park for 2 months, and then a month's traveling before I went back to university. And I'd done that, the second year I did it in Vancouver. And again, so there I worked in a riding stables and breeding farm, because I'd done a lot of horse riding growing up in the Isles of Scilly, and also even got to the point of running the local stables as well at one point for a summer. And so that was quite exciting. But my third summer, when I was graduating, I actually went off and I hitchhiked from Alaska to Central America, so about 7,000 miles, which was very exciting. And so I came back from that to find out that PhD funding had fallen through,
Oh,
and
no.
I'd signed a contract on my house and everything. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But fortunately, because I'd worked at the Students' Union, there was lots of jobs there. So they said you could keep working there. And the university also offered me a master's in analytical chemistry, which I thought, great, of doing organic synthesis, I need to analyze what I make, so it's going to be really, really good for kind of that backup. But I didn't realize how much I would enjoy it. And I really enjoyed my master's in analytical chemistry, so much so actually it was a 6-month taught and 6-month project, and I was fortunate enough to be the only person, well, I was fortunate enough to get my project actually out in industry. So I worked at Gellert Hill Research Station for my project, which at the time was Zeneca Agrochemicals, which of course is now Syngenta. And at the end of that, I had again more offers of PhDs, which was, I kind of given it up a little bit on those at the time, but I also had 2 job offers. So one of those to stay there, and also a second one to go and start an applications laboratory for an instrument supplier in Cambridge, which I thought, it's not very often you get the opportunity to start your own lab. So I grasped that opportunity and thought, yeah, okay, let's go for it. They weren't quite ready for me to start. So I actually continued on doing my marine biology, which I still very much enjoy. I went off to the Philippines for 3 months to live on a nice little island and survey the coral reefs to then make marine protected areas. So, and then came back and started my job in Cambridge.
What a little whirlwind. Well, little is probably the wrong word, actually. But tell me, what you said, you really enjoyed the analytical chemistry more than you anticipated. What just explain that a little bit.
So, well, how it was taught, the course, it was you go and learn about a particular technique, and then you go and put it into practice in the laboratory. And I'm quite a methodical, logical person anyway. So, and I think analytical chemistry is very methodical and logical. And so being able to analyze different things, was really, really interesting. And then when I got my job as an applications chemist, I was developing methods in actually going backtrack, my project for my analytical chemistry actually at Syngenta. So the main project was an LCMS, so liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry, and I was trying to improve ionization efficiency for the different chemicals that were made by Zenga Agrochemicals at the time. And my minor project was on gas chromatography mass spectrometry, which again was actually looking at impurities to try and inject a very high concentration of sample, the technical grade material, to then be able to identify the impurities much easier and have much better sensitivity. And it happened actually to take on that the GCMS project became a much bigger project, and that was my main one. And I really enjoyed both techniques, but actually GCMS was the one I really enjoyed, the gas chromatography mass spectrometry. Actually, the company that then I went to work for actually was selling GCMS instrumentation. So so I got to go and work in that area. On the first day, they said, right, here's a gas chromatograph. Just go and install it yourself. If it takes you 2 weeks, that's absolutely fine. Ask any questions you want. But it was brilliant because I then got to kind of really know the instrumentation. So I still do my own installations, so even now. And it also means that when I'm traveling, especially to developing countries, like for example last year I was working in Baghdad for the United Nations, the UN, for 2 weeks in 2 different laboratories. I was spending then a lot of my time training, but on the rest of the time was actually fixing their instrumentation in their labs, because of course they don't have very much support. So for example, they've got one of those labs that I worked in, they had 1 GCMS and there was 29 people who were relying on the results of it for drug analysis, and they hadn't had their auto sampler working for 2 years. They'd had to be doing manual injections. So it took me 10 minutes to fix it and train them on how to fix it in the future so they can look after it themselves. And so then it meant that they could analyze a lot more samples in a day, which is brilliant, especially when they don't have any electricity at night, so they had to shut down the instrument every night and restart it every morning, which is crazy conditions to be working in. But it's just really, really exciting for me to be able to go and help people, not only on their knowledge, the fundamental knowledge of how the techniques work, making sure and getting their methods to be much better, much more accurate, but also as well helping on the kind of the maintenance side of it, and the kind of fixing problems and troubleshooting, which I very much enjoy doing.
I bet. That sounds wonderful. You're here with me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast. If you like what you hear, please rate us on your favourite podcast platform. And I bet they're thrilled as well. Like some angel shipped in for them.
They're like, don't go home, we need to just keep you here. But even labs in the UK said that to me as well, so I'm quite
You're sought after. So you set up that lab in Cambridge. You've gone through. I don't know where you want to go next, because you did some stuff with the Open University as well. Can we go there next?
Yeah. So I worked in that lab for about 5.5 years. And at that end of that time, it kind of came to a natural progression that I would move on. But the reason for me to move on was actually because I wanted to go to Fiji for 6 weeks to survey more coral reefs, which is quite exciting. So we'd actually been given that as a wedding present, myself and my husband, to go and do some volunteer work in Fiji.
Who gave you that?
Through my father, so I'd met Coral Key Conservation, which is a charity, when I was 16. So they came to the Isles of Scilly to work with my father, so they started surveying the seagrass and everything else over there. And so I got to know them and then charity, and that's how I ended up going to Belize for 2 weeks to one of their expedition sites. and then of course the Philippines for 3 months, and then so it's essentially the owner of the charity basically said, it was an amazing present, a month in Fiji, kind of you're working, but it's you don't have to pay for your food or accommodation, I'll just cover all of that, and you just get yourself your flight out there and stuff, so that was very exciting. So
Great.
we ended up staying for 6 weeks, and then when I came back from there, I was just like, right, what I'm going to do. And I was fortunate enough to, first of all, the Open University approached me and said, right, we'd like you to come and work on our instruments here I've been working with them through my previous company for a couple of years, and kind of developing methods for them. And they've actually gone and bought the instrumentation, and they wanted help setting it all up. But also as well, I had several other people as well that basically wanted me to come do some work. So one was a company that my husband had been working with. They'd built an analytical instrument, and they needed things like it testing and manuals creating and writing and all that side of things, which engineers are brilliant at writing and making the instrumentation, but actually teaching people how to use it is a kind of quite a different skill again. So I suddenly went, right, okay, well, to charge people and get paid, I kind of need a company. So I went to the Cambridge Enterprise Agency. So I was still in my 20s at this point, of course. Went to the Cambridge Enterprise Agency and went, oh, you're a woman wanting to start a company. We don't get many of you. This is great. This is only in 2005, which I don't think is particularly long ago, but obviously it is. And they went, wow, female, want to start your own company. That's brilliant. We don't get many of you. And then they went, oh, if you're a woman wanting to start a scientific company, we don't think you've had any of you. So therefore then they went, right, go away and write a business plan. And I did, and they came back and went, that's the best business plan we've ever seen, really, you should just go for it. And it's like 24 hours later I had a limited company. So yes, and my company is Amphias Consulting, because at the time when we went to Fiji, the best way to look after emails is to own a domain and keep your emails in there. Because you didn't have smartphones or anything like that at the time, especially on desert islands. You could kind of get to a little cafe on one of the other little islands and get a computer and stuff and log in. So anyway, we'd been through the fish book and decided on the amphias.co.uk domain and bought that for our trip. So suddenly everything happened when I came back, and I was just like, oh, can't be asked to think of a name for my company. Right, check on Companies House. Yeah, Amphias Consulting's available. Right, we'll just use that then.
Amazing. Most people would probably spend a little bit more time than that thinking, oh, what should we call this business?
Yeah, probably. I was just more excited to actually be doing the work.
The most important thing.
Yeah. So anyway, so the Open University, fortunately, they said to me, okay, when you start your own business, that's really great. If it doesn't work out, come back and we've got a job here for you. So 9 months later, they came back to me and went, obviously your business is going quite well. So you don't want this job, but could you just come back as a consultant? So that was in 2006. So so I went back and there's basically been a consultant there ever since, working on everything from space, analysing, well, at first I was doing a lot of method development for analysing carbonaceous chondrites, which are a type of meteorite, by pyrolysis GC times GC TOFMS. But then we got involved in all sorts of other types of projects, etc. So for example, kind of food analysis, environmental samples, but also in tuberculosis. And one area that was actually in 2004, there was a picture, New Scientist, of a dog sniffing the crutch of King Charles, because they basically proven with the dogs that they can smell the urine and determine if somebody has bladder cancer or not. So the Open University started working with medical detection dogs. They approached the Open University and started talking about then actually sniffing the profile of what the dogs were sniffing. So I was asked to go and do some method development on that. And they've been for a little while going, these projects that you're doing for us, why don't you just go and do a PhD? So I went, okay, I'll start my PhD. So that was in 2009. Okay, I'll do my PhD, started all the work. And my first daughter was born in 2010, so a year later. So it was very much of I'm running a business, I'm doing a PhD, and I have a baby. Oh, and also I was racing cars as well. So I raced cars, and yes, so that's the thing. So I started yeah,
Racing car?
racing cars, so sprinting cars. So I've got a couple of really nice Toyotas. I've got an MR2 Turbo and a Celica GT4 WRC. And so we do sprinting, so it's against the clock. So you don't have to worry about other people like being on the track at the same time and crashing into you, although people do crash if they overcook it. So yeah, so I started racing cars probably not 2008, I think it was,
Wow.
as part of the sprint series, which is really good fun. What what they don't tell you is that, you know, kind of pregnancy is not a medical condition, so they can't stop you from racing when you're pregnant. So I was still racing at 7 months pregnant with my daughter.
No way.
Did a nice spin at 50 miles an hour in the gravel at one of the tracks. That was quite funny. And yeah, so and then I decided to stop after that because I was like 7 months. I couldn't really fit behind the steering wheel anymore anyway. So it was a little bit difficult. So yeah, so 3 weeks after I'd had my daughter, well, actually, so I spent, so one of the difficult things, of course, is working in chemistry labs when you're pregnant is very, very difficult. So I decided to take the last month off, and I went back into the Isles of Scilly because I wanted my daughter to be born there.
Just
So
explain that. Just explain that a little bit. Why is it so difficult?
difficult working in labs when you're heavily pregnant. I think it's because you're not an employee. You are going in as a consultant, so that could be for a day or two, or you know, less than a week usually. So trying to the whole paperwork of doing that is very, very difficult to come by. So especially when you're so pregnant, and you're usually spending a lot of time on your feet as well when you're teaching and fixing instruments. So it was just easier just to take that last month off and go back. Plus as well, it just meant I could go swimming sea every day and everything with my parents. So, and I wanted my daughter to be born there. Problem was, a few days, 2 days before she was born, I got pre-eclampsia.
Oh no.
And on the Isles of Scilly, they have maternity, so they have only a midwife-led unit. So therefore, having preeclampsia, they wanted me to go to a proper hospital. So I went, but there was a bit of a storm. Even though it was the end of August, there was a bit of a storm. So there was no flying of the normal helicopters. So she goes, right, I need to get to you. So she phoned basically 999 and asked for an ambulance. But the ambulance she asked for was actually a Royal Navy rescue helicopter, which then flew over to the Isles of Scilly, and I then had to. I think there's not very much that happens on the Isles of Scilly, so they all get very excited when they have to send somebody away. So we got 2 ambulances. Yeah, my husband had 10 minutes to run down the road to my parents' house, collect some clothes, to then jump on the helicopter to then fly over to the mainland. There was a bit of a storm. There was fog as well, so the helicopter couldn't land in a normal place next to the hospital in Truro, so it had to land on the cricket pitch. And so the ambulance was brand new, and he's very, very, very excited about the ambulance being brand new, but the cricket person was not very happy about the ambulance driver driving on the cricket pitch. So that was quite funny. So anyways, we drove flying through all the lights up to the hospital to find a whole camera crew up there and everything, because David Cameron had been holidaying at the same time in Cornwall, and his wife decided to start having their baby early. So heavy security in the whole hospital, like, you know, you almost having to show your passport to get in, etc. You know, loads of press outside. So anyway, so we go in, and then I don't know, it's just this chain reaction or something, that suddenly everybody was wanting to have their babies. So therefore, the whole maternity unit was actually full to bursting. So yeah. So anyway,
you probably weren't feeling particularly brilliant with preeclampsia, I imagine.
I felt absolutely fine. There was nothing wrong with me. So I was just like, you're making a big fuss. There's nothing wrong with me. But anyway, so my daughter was born successfully, and it's absolutely fine. But it was a bank holiday weekend, so we kind of got stuck on the mainland. So at 4 days old, she had her first helicopter ride outside of my tummy, basically. So she got to go on a helicopter back to the city. And we stayed then another 10 days, and then she got to go on the Selonian, which is goes across from, which is basically a passenger ferry, which goes from the Isles of Scilly back to Penzance. That's 40 miles by sea, very, very rough. So she had her first trip on a boat then at 10 days old. 11 days old, we went to National Trust property, met my gran. 12 days old, we got our home up to Cambridge, and then we decided to go camping at 14 days old at a car show with like 1,000 cars and 1,500 people. So she got her first camping experience to age 12 days old. And then it was kind of back to normal, except I started racing cars again when she was 3 weeks old. And then it was kind of like you drive around and yeah, you kind of like do your race, go back and breastfeed, do another race, go back and breastfeed. So you're doing all your laps, etc. But do you know what upsets a man more than by being beaten by a woman when driving? Being beaten by a pregnant woman. And so therefore I won trophies when I was pregnant driving with her, and also with my twins, who were born less than 18 months later.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's almost like Mother Nature saying, having a single child is you found it too easy, life didn't stop, you carried on, I worked. And that's the biggest problem actually, is you don't really get maternity leave when you have your own company, because you are employing people, you're responsible to making sure there's still money coming in, the people are getting paid, so you've got to do some work every day. And I did in hospital, as well as kind of every day afterwards. So all my children are very, very independent. But yeah, so 18 months later I then had my twins, and I carried on race. Well, I had a race booked 2 days after I found out I was pregnant with twins. And that was quite funny because I was just like, well, it's a high risk pregnancy, I'm not going to race this time cars. So but I'd already booked this one, so I like, right, I'm just going to take it easy, it's going to be my last one. So I'd like stop there at the start line, and then suddenly have terrible morning sickness, be jumping out the car, throwing up over the barriers, all the ambulance drivers laughing and all the blokes laughing at me, jump back in the car, race around. That day I came back with 2 trophies, so I was very pleased with that.
One for each of the twins.
One for each of the twins, absolutely. They're all on board though, absolutely.
So what stage were you at then? You gave birth to the twins. You were still doing the PhD at that point, and
Yeah,
the company's
absolutely.
still going strong?
Yeah. So the company was still going okay. And I was still, kind of, doing my part-time PhD as well. The biggest problem that I found is, because of course it was self-funded PhD, because of, through my business, is that when you have time to do the PhD, you don't have as much money coming in, because if you're not out training, consultancy, then you're not earning money. And then when you were earning money to pay for your PhD, you didn't have time to actually go and do the work. So it was very, very difficult. And it got to the point where actually, to be honest, in the first 2 years, I got enough data. My PhD's on disease diagnosis, so bladder cancer, prostate cancer, hepatic disorders, but also did a project on sepsis as well. And so I'd analysed about 3,000 samples or something, so huge amounts of data. But it was then just finding the time to write up. And it was kind of getting to that point that I had to make a decision. Either I wasn't going to write up, or I had to start straight away to do that. So I came to a compromise with my husband that I would write up every other evening and every other weekend. But I did have Saturday nights with my children in the house crying, going, "Mummy, please don't go and write your book. We just want you to be here with us for a change." But, I wrote, I think in that way, I wrote 50,000 words in 5 weeks.
Wow.
So because I really planned my work, because I didn't have really a lot of time to mess around or anything. And yes, about 50,000 words in the first 5 weeks. And then I spent another two months basically just getting all my data extracted and all written up. So yes, I basically submitted it in time, which was brilliant. And I remember the morning that I printed off my 3 copies, and my children all came to have a look, and they were still quite young at the time. And they were just like, "Wow, Mum, this is amazing." It's just like they could see all the work that I'd done. And I think that's a really great life lesson for them, really, is that you have to make sacrifices. You have to work really, really hard to do everything and to achieve everything that you want to do. So, it was quite funny actually, because the maximum number of words was 100,000. So I wrote 100,000 words exactly. So it was quite funny.
I love that. So wow, newly decorated, with a young family, thriving business. You'd almost think that you could just sort of settle into a coasting pattern, maybe like just take a breather for a minute, but that wasn't necessarily what happened. You've you've presided over, interest groups and
Definitely.
been and chaired the trust funds. Let's talk. I don't know which one should we go with? Should we go with the recycling organization and
Yeah, I can start off
yeah,
with that one. So
trustee?
absolutely. I mean, so in 2016, I was encouraged from other people in the analytical community to actually stand for election on the Analytical Division Council. And to my surprise, I was elected, which is very exciting. And at the time, I didn't have my PhD. So I was just a Mrs. Diane Turner. And I suddenly found myself in a council with lots of professors and lots of older men and not very many women, which was quite surprising at the time. But, it is so much improved since then. It's just incredible. And of course, part of that was also then becoming a trustee for the Analytical Chemistry Trust Fund. On another side was then the Recycling Organisation for Research Opportunities, so RoRo. So one of my colleagues who'd been doing some consultancy for me, some contracting for my company, he basically ran RoRo, and this is basically with your experiences, then you'll be great to be as a trustee as well. So I became a trustee of RoRo as well. So, and I'm still a trustee of RoRo, but in terms of the Analytical Division Council, I spent my 3 years as an elected member on numerous committees and really throwing myself into it, and I really enjoyed it. Towards the end of my 3 years, I decided, right, I wanted to stand and become, and really see if I could get elected again as a member of the council. So I didn't, because you can do 2 terms. And then again, the people who would encourage me the first time to stand up or then mentioned, oh yeah, what about becoming standing for election for president? I was like, I will never win that. So I'm going to still be on there as becoming an elected member, because hopefully that will happen. But also as well, I got nominated as the next president, and much to my surprise, I got elected. So thank you to all of those people who elected me as that next president. So that was in 2019. So I spent my year as president-elect. And then I was, and then COVID hit, of course. So right at the beginning of my presidency, my 3-year term, suddenly we were all thrust into COVID. Suddenly all the meetings became virtual. So I remember kind of a lot of meetings of discussing, right, how can we do our, kind of the events that we'd normally do as in-person events, and of course having an input into all the kind of, kind of virtual events, and then of course then the hybrid events that as well afterwards, such as the very exciting that the RSC has continued that ability to do hybrid events, especially for those people who can't attend in-person events. So I was on that for as the president for 3 years, and during that time, of course, there's been all the changes to the prizes. So for me as well, there's very few. When I first was elected in 2016, there were very few people from industry actually on the council, even though there are more members in the division, which is now of course the community, actually from industry. So that's during my time going to that balance of 50-50, kind of 50% male female, kind of more of a gender balance, but also industry versus academia has been brilliant, and just seeing all those improvements has been amazing. And of course also then that change from divisions through to subject communities, so that was a lot of extra meetings. And of course also for the analytical science community, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that there's so many other aspects compared to other communities. So for example, we have the regions, the analytical division regions, we have the analytical methods committee, which is then fed in from the Analytical Methods Trust. And then we have the Analytical Chemistry Trust Fund. Even though it's not part of the Royal Society of Chemistry, it's usually the elected members that become trustees. So we've kind of had a whole change in those ways of how trustees are selected for the Analytical Chemistry Trust Fund, and how everything kind of fits together as well. So during that whole change from divisions to communities, there was a huge amount to think about and to plan and organize. But it's very very exciting thing to do, and I'm so glad that I got involved. And I think we've just come so far in the last few years, and the Royal Society of Chemistry has, And of course also I'm on the government chemist program expert group as well, so I oversee the work, so that oversees basically the work of the government chemist. And again, that's the first time that someone had been asked to actually stand on that and represent the RSC on that. And I'm actually, even though I stepped down at the end of October this year, so I finished in July and Zoe Ayres, the new president, took over. I had a 4-month handover period, and then I'm still remaining on the GC peg as well.
So when you say oversee the government chemist, can you talk a little bit about that and tell us how it works?
Absolutely. So essentially the government chemist is the referee lab. So for example, say some food is imported and the importers then have different results, or the Port Authority have different results for what the exporters from another country actually have. So that will go through, then samples be analysed by the referee, so the government chemist laboratory, and then that is then what's used, the results, to go to court, etc.
And that's
So it's
make sure things are at the right standards.
yeah, absolutely. So also as well, they work on a lot of projects. So it's trying to look forward, to think about what new legislation is going to come in, what new trends are going to come in, what is going to be important. So there was a stakeholder meeting just over a year ago, and that set up the priorities for the government chemists in terms of the projects and the newer types of analyses that we're going to be looking at. So yeah, so it's very exciting to be on that. And to give feedback into that as well. I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of discussions on their latest meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the work they do is amazing, and the work they do on the small budget that they have is absolutely incredible. So, and we are all very, very lucky, because of course without these methods, they support the Food Standards Agency and a lot of other government departments that are all working so hard to make sure that the food that we go and buy from our supermarkets is safe to eat, and our drinks are safe to drink, etc. as well. So yeah, very lucky.
Yeah, it's great to get a little bit of an insight in that, because it's not necessarily something that goes through everyone's mind. Well, it's certainly not mine
Absolutely.
on a regular basis.
Absolutely, but all the documents are available on the government chemist website. So there's even you can even get all the minutes of the meetings, etc. So the non-attributed minutes, and it also shows you all the different people who are involved in the government chemist program expert group as well. So of course it's really important that all the different agencies feed into it, but also as well independent people like myself who just look at it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. I have to start looking things up in future.
Absolutely, yes.
So, I mean, you'd be well within your rights to retire, I think, after everything you've achieved and done and had fun, and it just sounds so full and successful. But I half suspect you're not on the brink of retiring. But I've got no idea what's next. Have you?
No, I'm not sure what's next. I'm still doing a lot of outreach. So I was doing a careers event at my local, so my children's secondary school last week, and I'm actually back there in March with the meteorites from the Open University. So everyone likes to hold a bit of Mars or a bit of the moon, etc. So I really enjoy doing the kind of outreach, and I think everyone really should be doing outreach, kind of like talking about the exciting jobs that I do, and I was like working in a nuclear power station to kind of traveling to places like Baghdad and Kuwait and Trinidad and everything. And I just think about all the places that I've worked over the last year and the different types of applications and analysis, kind of, and I mean, analytical chemistry is used in every single industry. And that's what I love, kind of like going in to talk about careers. I say to people, right, everything in this room relies on analytical chemistry. So what career would you like to do? And tell me, and I will then tell you how analytical chemistry is involved in that career. So, and people was like, really, wow, and they've never heard of analytical chemistry and how important it is. And I mean, for me, it's like kind of, there's a shortage of analytical chemists really in this country, and I think that's something that we really, really should be focusing on. So kind of looking forward, I'm not sure at the moment. I have said with the Royal Society of Chemistry that I am interested in being involved in different ways, but I just need a year off, because actually it's been a lot of time over, especially over the last 3 years, you know, kind of like being, you know, there's a new group, the SILF group, which is a Science and Innovation Leadership Forum. So that was a new group with the change from divisions to communities, which I've chaired on one session, of course, and attended other meetings, as well as the members community board. So it's a huge number of meetings. Oh, and also the I think it was like 100 prize nominations I reviewed this year as well. So that totals about
3. Diane.
So yeah, so I've just gone, right, I just need a year off, see where I am, and of course, and think about, you know, kind of spending more time with my family. I'm also, my children, they all swim, so I'm also a judge for swimming. So I'm just finishing off my J2 level, so my judge level 2 on stroke. So I spent all day Sunday and Saturday night last weekend at competitions, and the previous week and the whole weekend at a different competition as well. So that takes over quite a lot of my time, is actually just going to spending it swimming competitions, judging stroke, etc., and turns. So which is always exciting. And I know, Harriet, that you're really interested in swimming at the moment. So yes. So I think at the moment it's just, yeah, I think, you know, more enough to think about, but then starting to look to the future.
So your year off is actually involved becoming a swimming judge. That's
I've been,
that's straight.
yeah, I've been a swimming judge now for several years, actually.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay.
Since I could, as soon as possible after COVID. Right. So there's a real kind of a shortage of officials at swimming competitions. So again, if you're listening to this and your child's involved in swimming, definitely think about going and becoming an official, because if I have time to do it, I'm sure that you have time to do it too.
Oh God, you make me feel guilty. Fine, I'll look into it, Diane, I promise.
But actually, it's nothing like to improve your own swimming is watching and learning all the things what you're trying to kind of look for at competitions, in case of any infractions. So yes.
Noted. I'll bear that in mind. And look, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you. I half expect you to come up with another book any minute now. But if you do, you must let me know.
Okay. I am actually, Sophie, that's one thing I've completely forgot to mention. So yes, so I am on the editorial board of the book series. So it's practical guides for laboratory chemists. So we're looking at about 30, even more books. So I've been on the board for the last couple of years. So as we've been getting it together. So again, I think only last week I had a meeting with somebody else that I found as potential authors for another book. So there is for each technique in analytical chemistry. It's really what you need to know for that technique. So again, so one of the things I didn't talk about was the Pan-African Chemistry Network, which of course I've been involved in through the Royal Society of Chemistry for quite a few years now. And the book that we wrote was really to accompany that course. So if you think about in a developing country, people basically might have an instrument, they haven't got any resources, they haven't got a service engineer to come and help them. So therefore, what theory do you need to know? And, you know, to understand the instrument, the parameters, they can develop the method, put in quality control, do maintenance, do troubleshooting of the whole instrument. So there's a whole package is that book. So with the practical guides, again, the idea is that then for people who, you know, kind of like it's everything you need to know. So it's not like a textbook from university that goes very heavily into the theory. It's the theory that you need to know for actually running the instrument, developing the methods, maintaining the instrument, and also troubleshooting it as well. So that's why there's a whole series with the A level books, the A books, basically the top level. So like mass spectrometry, chromatography. The B books are kind of the technique, like GCMS, LCMS, etc. And then the C level books are actually using those those techniques for different applications. So you've got several different layers in there. So I'm planning to author some of those books in that series. So yes, that is my next thing to do.
Well, we'll look out for those. And thank you so very much for taking some time out to talk to me. And tell us your story, because I think, well, I've been completely blown away. I want to hear it again. Um,
Thank you very much, Harriet. And thank you for inviting me on.
it's a pleasure. See you soon.